Okay, class, welcome back. Doing a few more trig review problems. Once again, a lot of this should look really familiar. So hopefully, and there's a ton of overlap, so hopefully this is worthwhile review that is just going to go ahead and cement a lot of these concepts behind sine, cosine, the relationship, secant, etc., etc. So I'm going to call this trigonometric review, part 2. Okay, so the first problem is I'm going to give you, let's see, last time we left off with problem number, let's figure it out. Problem number 5, so since we're continuing on, let's call it problem number 6. So here I'm going to give you a trigonometric function, and I want you to calculate what this is without using a calculator. Okay, so this is going to look a little bit crazy, but sure enough, you should be able to do it without using a calculator. Okay, so I've got the cosine of 2.3 times the secant of 2.3. Now, how would I go about solving this? Well, this is a little bit weird. I don't like dealing with secants. All I need to remember here is that the secant of theta is equal to 1 over the cosine of theta. So once I've got the cosine here, the cosine of 2.3, so I've got the cosine of 2.3, just rewriting that. I'm going to rewrite the secant as 1 over, instead of secant of 2.3, I'm going to rewrite it as 1 over the cosine of 2.3. Now here I've got the cosine of 2.3 divided by the cosine of 2.3. This is just going to be equal to, you can just write it like this, cosine of 2.3 divided by the cosine. And I've got something divided by something. Sure enough, this is just equal to 1. Done. Easy enough. Basically, you just need to remember what these trigonometric relationships are between secant and cosine, or cosecant and sine. Okay, so here I want you guys to, the next problem is going to be split up into 3 parts. I want you to find the exact value of this trigonometric function without using a calculator. Okay, so once again, you can use a unit circle, but you cannot use a calculator. So the cosine of 9 pi divided by 4, this is what I want you to solve. Well, the first thing I'm going to notice is that this 9 pi over 4, it's greater than 2 pi, right? So 2 pi is 8 pi over 4, so I need to rewrite this. And so here we're talking about those coterminal angles, right? They're spinning around and around the unit circle, and eventually they're coming back and landing. So I can rewrite this cosine of 9 pi over 4 as the cosine of 8 pi over 4 plus pi over 4, right? Just broke it up. 8 pi over 4 is just equal to pi over 2. So I can say this is going to be the cosine, or not pi over 2, but 2 pi. 2 pi plus pi over 4. And I know that because cosines and sines are periodic functions, once I go around, I can basically just get rid of one of these 2 pi's, right? So if I go back around, the cosine of pi over 4 is going to be exactly the same as the cosine of 9 pi over 4. So I can say that this is just going to be equal to the cosine of pi over 4. Now I can look up on my unit circle and figure out that, sure enough, the cosine of pi over 4 is associated with the point square root of 2 over 2, comma, square root of 2 over 2. And the cosine, is the cosine associated with the x or the cosine associated with the y value? Hopefully you guys are screaming at your computers right now. The cosine is associated with the x value. And so here I can say that just that the cosine of pi over 4 is going to be equal to the cosine of 9 pi over 4, which is going to be equal to the square root of 2 over 2. So very similar to problems we were doing yesterday, just an extra step involved. Okay, let's step it up a little bit here. Let's go problem 8. So same idea. I want you to figure out what the value is at a particular point. But in this case, I'm going to give you the secant of negative 9 pi over 4. Okay, now don't freak out. This will definitely has some extra steps involved in it, but we'll work through it. You can get this no problem. So first thing I'll notice is I've got negatives and I've got this 9 pi over 4. So I'm going to start breaking this up, right? And so just like we did with coterminal angles, I can add 2 pi onto this just like I sort of subtracted 2 pi from this one up here to get to my to get to the angle between 0 and 2 pi. Here I'm going to add 2 pi until I end up with a value that's somewhere between 0 and 2 pi. So I'm just going to sort of sidebar over here and say negative 9 pi over 4 plus, and I'm going to add 2 pi onto this. Now the 2 pi I'm going to add onto, just like how I said 8 pi over 4 is equal to 2 pi. I'm just going to add 8 pi over 4 onto this and see what happens. So this is just equal to 2 pi. Now, negative 9 pi over 4 plus 8 pi over 4 is going to be negative pi over 4. So you might be able to look at your unit circle and figure this one out, but I'm going to go ahead, because it's a negative value and I'm looking for a value between 0 and 2 pi, I'm going to try to keep it consistent and do the same thing again. Right? So I added 2 pi onto it, didn't quite get back into the positive range, so I'm going to add 2 pi onto it again. So I'm going to come over here and say negative pi over 4, add 2 pi, in this case I'm going to say it's 8 pi over 4, and this is going to be equal to 7 pi over 4. Now I'm looking pretty good. Okay, it's not my 100% correct answer, but I'm getting closer. So I can say the secant of negative 9 pi over 4 is going to be equal to the secant of 7 pi over 4. 7 pi over 4. Boom. Okay, now the secant, second thing I need to remember, now I've got my angles correct, the secant is just going to be equal to 1 over the cosine of whatever the angle is. And in this case, my angle is 7 pi divided by 4. So secant 1 over the cosine. So now I just need to remember what my cosine value is of 7 pi over 4. Now, 7 pi over 4, I just remember, or I can look at my unit circle, and I remember that this is associated with the point root 2 over 2, comma, negative root 2 over 2. Obviously, we're using a lot of these points associated with the unit circle, so it's important that you guys are able to construct them right, because if you can construct them right, you get your answers really easily. Now, the cosine, as always, is associated with the x value. Okay, so the cosine of 7 pi over 4 is going to be equal to root 2 over 2. But if you remember, I'm trying to find the reciprocal of this. So I need to say 1 over the cosine of 7 pi over 4 is going to be equal to 1 over, or I can just say, instead of root 2 over 2, I can say 2 over root 2. Now once again, I need to rewrite this so that I get rid of this rational denominator. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by root 2 over 2, and just end up with 2 root 2 over, and then root 2 times root 2 is just going to be 2. These cancel, and I just end up with square root of 2. Now this is my total 100% correct answer. So the secant of negative 9 pi over 4 is going to be equal to root 2. Tricky one that involves a couple of extra steps, but you guys can handle this and do fantastically. Okay, so let's move on. I've got a couple more quick ones. I'm going to do the same thing, but in this case, I want to do I want to find out what the tangent of 5 pi over 4 is. Now this one definitely is already in the realm between 0 and 2 pi, so that's totally fine. I don't need to do any maneuvering of or massaging of the equation here. All I need to do is look up what my 5 pi over 4 point is. Now my 5 pi over 4, I'm going to find out that that's in the third quadrant, and this is associated with the point, if you look at your unit circle, negative root 2 over 2, comma, negative root 2 over 2. So once I know that, I just know that it's going to be y over x. Now my y and my x are exactly the same. So negative root 2 over 2 divided by negative root 2 over 2 is just going to be equal to 1. Easy peasy. Last problem, 10. Last review problem. Okay, so here, once again, looking at my unit circle is the first thing that I should be constructing. I want to know what the cosine of 3 pi over 4 is. That's part A, okay? So once I can look at my unit circle and I find that cosine of 3 pi over 4 is associated with the point negative root 2 over 2, comma, root 2 over 2. Now cosine, of course, is always intricately tied to the x values. So the cosine of 3 pi over 4, I can just read it off, is going to be negative root 2 over 2. Easy, just like that. Now part B is I want to know what is the cosine of 11 pi over 4. Now I can see right away that 3 pi over 4 and 11 pi over 4, they're periodic functions, right? So this is the exact same point. I'm just 2 pi greater than 3 pi over 4. So this is basically equal to just saying the cosine of 8 pi over 4 plus 3 pi over 4, which is equal to the cosine, 8 pi over 4 is just equal to 2 pi plus 3 pi over 4. Boom. Now because it's a periodic function, I can just look at the cosine of 3 pi over 4. Well, I already know what the cosine of 3 pi over 4 is. I just figured that out. So I know that this is going to be negative square root of 2 over 2. Now, simple problem, right? But it's important to know why you get the answer you can. So if you start at one point on the unit circle, in this case, this point is going to be over here somewhere. If I start at this point on the unit circle, and I go one full revolution around, another 2 pi, end up at the same point, the cosine is going to be exactly the same. Okay, seniors, I'll sign off there. Best of luck on the quiz. We'll work through more problems like this and answer questions, any questions that you guys might have.